We're back.
shutters that
We're back and
completely
we're still
black
alive.
out everything.
Blacks it all out.
Yeah.
You can control the light. You can control the sound. We've got a better mic this time. What
Yep.
is going on? Broadcasting globally, live around the world from the golden EIB microphone. It's Roger and Zara.
Let's do this. Whatever
Okay,
it
pum
is
pum
we're going to
pum.
do.
What?
Let's do this.
Talking to the mic.
Let's do this, Zara.
Boom, I hear you now. Better than ever. All
Oh,
right.
awesome.
So, for those of you who are just joining us, we are picking up through our read through of the Summa Theologica by St. Thomas Aquinas. We will share a screen. Share a screen. We just got through the arguments about the arguments for the existence of God and whether or not they can even exist. And now we're going to get on to the third part of that. But before we do, there's something that future scientists are going to have to discover and explore and look into the possible causal connections and mechanisms behind it. It's called the power of simultaneity. And it happens very shortly. All you have to do is grab your cup, your mug, your glass, your tankard, your chalice, your thermos, or your stein, your canteen, your jug, or your flask, your vessel of any kind, and fill it with your favorite liquid. I'm going to drink a caffeine-free bubbly beverage. And join me now for the join us both now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything, literally everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens right now. Go. The simultaneity. You can feel
Yes.
it. Ooh, chills. Okay, let's add to stage the existence of God in 3 articles. We did these 2 last time, so let's pum our way right down. You can check out the last video, and once the website's live, or if you have the secret password, you can check out what we did, or you can find it on YouTube. Okay, here we go. Whether God exists. What fun. Let's make that a little bigger.
Awesome.
Let's zoom it this way a bit. I'm digging it. I think. Oh, where are we? Oh, here we are. Okay. Once again, he's making distinctions, breaking things down. He's going to deal with God and God's existence. We dealt with 2 questions: whether or not analytically you know God exists, whether or not it might be possible to demonstrate him in an a posteriori sort of way. Now we're going to get into whether God exists. First thing he does, of course, and we won't rehearse this every time, but he gives arguments he doesn't hold against his position. Then he states his position, usually with a quotation from Aristotle or Augustine or from the Bible or something. And then he actually gives his reason based arguments for his position on the question. And this time that's a lot longer than before. And then he directly addresses the objections in the beginning and then moves on to the next question. So here we go. The question before us today is whether or not God exists. And objector number 1 stands up and says, "It seems that God does not exist, because if one of 2 contraries be infinite, the other would be altogether destroyed. But the word God means that he is infinite goodness. If therefore God existed, there would be no evil discoverable. But there is evil in the world. Therefore, God does not exist." Okay, we've got a straightforward deductive argument. Both God and evil can't exist. Evil exists, therefore God doesn't exist. Pretty straightforward argument. Objector number 2 stands up and says, in addition, it is superfluous to suppose that what can be accounted for by a few principles has been produced by many. Oh, superfluous. We don't need it. But it seems that everything we see in the world can be accounted for by other principles. Doesn't require the God hypothesis. Supposing God did not exist. Suppose he didn't exist, you can still explain everything else. So why make extra hypotheses for no reason? For all natural things can be reduced to one principle, which is nature. Nature's all you need. As Norm MacDonald said, nature. No, as Norm MacDonald once said, God, or as stupid people call it, nature. But he's saying there's a difference between the two, and nature's all you need for explanation. So why add God to the mix? And all voluntary things can be reduced to one principle, which is human reason or will. So we got all the natural things, the physical world by nature, and we've got all the actions by human agency. We don't need God. Therefore, there's no need to suppose God's existence. It's just added. On the contrary, it is
These are
said,
actually hold on. These are actually quite still relevant today, objections to God, because you have the ethicist who says, well, we can be good without God, and evil is explainable away. It's just the absence of good, or people are ignorant or something, or there are mental illnesses. You don't need to God in the mix to explain away either goodness or evil. It's all just atoms jiggling anyway, whatever. And for the second one, he's just saying, well, what, just use Occam's razor and just call God nature and have just get on with it, and let's idolize something else that may be probably inferior. But that's how the arguments go, at least in my perspective.
yeah, these two arguments definitely still exist today. How can there be a God if there's evil? There's definitely evil. There's no God. And why are you making up things we don't need? We got our science, it explains everything. What's there left to explain? Why would you need the God hypothesis? It's superfluous. Those are both arguments that are made today. Uh, Aquinas doesn't agree, although he might agree with the idea that evil is just the absence of God, which you mentioned earlier. But he doesn't agree with these two positions, and he's just going to state matter of factly, it is said in the person of God, I am who I am. Okay, fine. So he says that God exists according to the Bible, but that's not his argument. He's not saying, therefore, believe that God exists. He's just stating his position is the opposite of these two, and then he's going to give us his reasons now. So we'll start the philosophy from Aquinas right here. Let's see if we can follow along. The first two, we could follow along pretty easily. So let's see how we judge his argument here. I answer that the existence of God can be proved in 5 ways. Buckle up, everybody. We should take notes, but we'll take notes later and put them on the website. The first and more manifest way is the argument from motion. All right, told you he wasn't going to cite Revelation. He's going to say, look around, things move, therefore God. It is certain and evident to our senses that in the world some things are in motion. Zeno, Parmenides, you want to step up here? Because you're denying what we all know to be true. Now,
Yeah, of
whatever,
course, of course, of course.
but
Yeah,
Aquinas might have an answer to them. He might actually solve their problem. Now, whatever is in motion is put in motion by another. Things don't just get into motion by themselves. For nothing can be in motion except it is in potentiality to that towards which it is in motion. Whereas a thing moves inasmuch as it's in act, it's acting. For motion is nothing else than the reduction of something from potentiality to actuality. It could be over there and it's becoming over there. So it's actualizing its ability to be in a different location. But nothing can be reduced from potentiality to actuality except by something in a state of actuality. I wonder if Newton even needed to be born. Are his laws hidden in here or are they missed? I don't know. Let's find out. Thus, that which is actually hot, as fire, makes wood, which is potentially hot, to be actually hot. The Aristotelians should start getting a little excited that we're reading somebody who views physics this way and not in a post Cartesian sort of way, and thereby moves and changes it. Now, it is not possible that the same thing should be at once in actuality and potentiality in the same respect. Law of non contradiction. That's simple. We can agree with that, but only in different respects. Okay, great. For what is actually hot cannot simultaneously just be potentially hot, but it is simultaneously potentially cold, or maybe even potentially hotter still, something like that. But if it's actually a certain heat, it's not potentially that heat anymore. It is therefore impossible that in the same respect and in the same way, a thing should be both mover and moved, and that it should move itself. Okay, let's follow the argument here. You can't make something be different than it is unless you're already actualizing what that thing has in potentiality and then giving it that ability, right? So I actually have the energy to move in that direction. And so I can take the ball, which potentially could be moving in that direction, and I can actualize the ball in that direction. I can give it motion. Likewise, it seems like motion also includes transfer of thermal energy, according to him, it seems. So the fire that is underneath the pot of cold water is actually hot, and it can induce put into the water the quality of the hotness that it needs to boil, but only because it's actually there. Now, if the water was alone, the water is potentially hot, but only if the thing that is actually hot comes to it. So the water can't both be actually and potentially hot, because then it would all just be actually hot and it wouldn't be potentially hot anymore. So whatever actualizes it into heatness has to already have that in actuality, has to actually already be hot in order to make the thing that could be potentially hot, hot. So therefore, we know the pot of water doesn't heat itself. That's what it should not move itself. Therefore, whatever is in motion must be put in motion by another, if that by which it is put in motion be itself put in motion. Then this also must needs be put in motion by another, and that by another again. Okay, so the cue ball, no. The 9 ball goes into the corner pocket. Why? Because the 3 ball hit at a certain angle. Why did the 3 ball move over there to hit it? Why was it moving? Because the cue ball hit the 3 ball. Why did the cue ball move towards the 3 ball? Because the stick that I used, the cue stick that I used, hit the cue ball in the thing. Why did that happen? Well, because the muscles that I have in my arm contracted and I induced motion. Okay, fine. Go back, go back, go back, go back, go back, go back, go back. How far do you have to go back to explain why the 9 ball went into the corner pocket? He says, well, everything in the universe that is actually in motion to induce motion in something else itself had to be actualized into motion by when it only had potentiality, by something else that could actually move it. So you go back and back and back and back. Does that go back forever? It can't go back forever, or we'd never be here. So that's the
But
next thing.
look at it this way. If you try to explain it, this analogy until the first mover, you eventually depart from the realm of materiality, and you start to have to go to the realm of mind.
Yeah, you're going to learn
Yeah.
something about the quality of the existence of the divine. So you're right. My arm moved, but eventually it gets to the agent's will, right? We could have kept tracking that back. How did I have enough energy to think the thought and make the decision to move the cue ball, to move the stick into the cue ball and mounts it into the 3, into the 9, into the corner? It's like, okay, maybe I ate something or whatever, but
Yeah.
um, you're correct. We're gonna get to not just the idea that there must be a prime mover, but we're gonna get to know something about the nature of that prime mover. So once again, you're steps ahead of Aquinas.
Yeah,
Let's
when you have to traverse from neurophysiology to actual mentality to actual mind, it's not a trivial transition.
Yeah, that's true.
It's an extremely important shift of ontology.
Yeah, we're gonna see how he deals with that at some point. But we've seen a lot of philosophers dealing with it in our year 1 material when we're looking at philosophy of mind. There's a lot of different ways of trying to deal with that question. But he'll get to that in another question, but it's definitely upcoming. It's coming up. So you see all sorts of problems that are coming. But for now, can he just establish that God exists? So the next thing he says is you can't go back forever. The list of dominoes can't go back to infinity because you wouldn't have enough time, maybe, for all those dominoes to hit each other to get to you if they go back to infinity. Uh, then there would be no first mover and consequently no other mover if it went back to infinity. So he doesn't think you can get the ball rolling if you go back to infinity. And it's not just temporally, like I said, but if there's an infinite number of dominoes, if there's an infinite series of causal events leading up to this proximal causal event, he hasn't said because of temporality. Like I said, he just said that would stop you from ever having a first mover. And so, how do you get the ball rolling? Seeing that the subsequent movers move only in as much as they are put in motion by the first mover, as the staff moves only because it is put in motion by the hand. Therefore, it is necessary to arrive at a first mover. You have to have something that knocked over the first domino, put in motion by the other. by no other than that first mover. So there must be, so everything we know of is made actualized in motion. Everything that can move is actualized to move by something that already is actualized as moving. There must be something that's not like that, is what he's saying. So this is what Roger was seeing before we even got to it in the text, which is not only is he saying there must be a God, the nature of that God must be something that is in motion by no other than himself, something that is self-actualized, because everything else requires explanation, and those explanations can't go back to infinity. We wouldn't be here seeing the things we're seeing. So all the things we see happening imply that there must be something that's not like all the things we see happening, and that we understand to be God. Let's
Yeah,
pause. What do you think?
everything else of the chains of consequences that we're talking about, with your nicely put an analogy of the billiard balls, and the player, everything that you can explain there materially, it's just this same old atoms hitting atoms, van der Waals interactions, chemistry and physics interactions going on, everything neurophysiological, biochemistry, whatever. It's samey, it's the same kind of thing. But
Yeah.
when you have to reach the initiator, the actual thing that is celebrated in so many ancient myths, mind is celebrated in the Odyssey, in the journey to the west, as the Monkey King, as in the Odyssey as Odysseus. So the mind is extremely versatile, does many things, and has many potentialities already actualized, and is actualization in itself. And so it's just a little jump of extrapolation to figure out that there must be a mind that towers above all others.
Yes, we'll have to see what he thinks about our minds in the determinism nexus that you brought up. Well, we don't know what he thinks about that yet. But yes, that's exactly right. Everything you see, all the physical phenomena that you can study in science are all, there's a good word for it, they're all contingent. Okay, they all require explanation from other things that are likewise also contingent. So we could sum up the nature of this type of argument by saying the contingentiality of everything we see necessitates something that is of itself, the great I am, the thing that just is, must be in order for all these other contingent things to be, because all of them require something else, and that can't go back forever. That's his argument. So that's the first of five.
Just
We
very
could check it.
shortly, he also reproduces really nicely here, basically Aristotelian arguments regarding God.
Yeah. We're really gonna do the ensemble and get a more Platonic view of things as well from the medieval. So we should probably add that as a supplement video to this one. But let's keep focusing on Aquinas for now. And yeah, we've got an Aristotelian expert here who's probably jumping up and down at like, I know exactly how you're thinking because this is how I think about everything, even if you might agree with all the conclusions or whatever. This is the way of thinking that is very Aristotelian. All right, let's see what we think about the second argument. The second way to prove that God exists is from the nature of the efficient cause. Efficient cause. In the world of sense, so things we can see, taste, touch here, we find there is an order of efficient causes. There is no case known, neither is it indeed possible, in which a thing is found to be efficient, the efficient cause of itself. So everything is contingent again. For so it would be prior to itself, which is impossible. Okay, it's a mirror image of what he was saying before, that things cannot be actual and potential at the same time. You need something actualized to actualize the next thing. Um, Nothing can be its own cause of all the things we observe through our senses. So he had already said in the first section that all of our knowledge comes through our senses, right? So is he an empiricist? Well, he's an empiricist who's saying all of our knowledge that comes to us ultimately derives from our senses. But one of the pieces of knowledge we can get from our senses is the David Hume problem, right? He's predicting It's amazing how what we said before is one of the reasons why we're doing Aquinas is to see that a lens through which you can understand all of philosophy is not as a temporal, chronological, these guys had these ideas, then this idea was invented, then this idea was invented. We're already dealing with Kant and Mill and I mean, we've seen responses to Kierkegaard already. We've seen Occam's razor cited in the objection that we just read. If you look at the previous videos of what we've seen, this is a tent where over time we've just taken the best minds that have contributed to this conversation over millennia and just stuck them all in the same tent together, and they're all talking to each other in real time. Aquinas illustrates that. That's one of the things I was hoping we would notice as we read this. Let's see if we can zoom in a bit. I'm not sure it's big enough.
Yeah, if you want new ideas, just read all the books.
Yeah. All right. Better said that way. I like it. Okay. The second way is from the nature of the efficient cause. In the world of sense, we find that there is an order of efficient causes. A causes B, causes C, causes D. There's no case where D causes D because it would have to already be the D that it needs to be in order to cause it. That just doesn't make any sense. Now, in efficient causes, it is not possible to go on to infinity. So this can't go back forever efficiently. All right, in the sense of what is good enough to make the next thing happen. Because in all efficient causes following in order, the first is the cause of the intermediate cause, and the intermediate cause is the cause of the ultimate cause, whether the intermediate cause be several or only one. Now, to take away the cause is to take away the effect. Therefore, if there be no first cause among efficient causes, there will be no ultimate, nor any intermediary cause. But if in efficient causes it is possible to go on to infinity, there will be no first efficient cause. Either will there be ultimate effect, nor any intermediate efficient causes, all of which is plainly false. All right. Even if we only live here in Middle Earth where we're seeing domino Q hit domino R, hit domino S, he says, well, everything we have available to us through our senses is in the nature of dominoes, being hit by efficient dominoes sufficient enough to knock them into the next domino. So, what do I know about the cosmos? If that's all I can know about it is through my experience of as a contingent being of these contingent efficient causes, is well, that can't go on forever. You can't explain this one by saying this one because then you require, well, how did that one knock over? Well, how did that one knock over? How did that one knock over? If that goes back forever and you never have a terminus to it, you don't have an explanation for why this one even bumped into that one in the first place. So you get your explanation. Now we get more than just the existence of God out of this, and we've already seen that before he got to it. Roger pointed it out. Then he did get to it one way, and now he's getting it to another. He's saying the nature of the divine is that which is making this bump into this, not in a Mellenbrunchian sort of way necessarily, but the ultimate purpose and end of all of these dominoes is defined by the same first cause. Okay, but
It
if
was
in efficient causes it is possible to go on to infinity, there will be no first efficient cause. Neither will there be an ultimate effect, nor any intermediate efficient causes, all of which is plainly false. We know that that's not the case. Therefore, it is necessary to admit a first efficient cause to which everyone gives the name of God. What we mean is where everything came from, what defines everything, and what its ultimate purpose is. That's what we're talking about when we're talking
yeah.
about God.
He,
And if you
he's
just
kind
look,
he's kind of defining what merits us assigning the label God, and so he is in his own way using Aristotelian thought here, portraying what merits us assigning the label God. So the first efficient cause. Also, it's I think worthwhile to notice here that efficient cause is one of the Aristotelian terms par excellence from a group of other three causes. Aristotle lists four causes: the material cause, so what is a thing made of; the formal cause, its shape or design; the efficient cause, how it was made or how it was put into motion; and the final cause, which is the purpose of the thing, the telos. So yeah, he is using one of the three.
that is correct. I'm going to try to pull that up right now. That is 100% correct. And he's even referring to two of the other ones as well. Intrinsic, extrinsic. What does Aristotle mean by cause? Is this a good website? Formal cause. What makes a thing what it is? Efficient cause. What makes it come into being? It's like its source. That's the one he's talking about. Final cause, the purpose or end. He's referred to that as, well, you won't have efficient cause. You also won't have the final cause. And what was the first one?
Perhaps the material cause.
Material cause.
Yeah.
Of course. Right there. Okay, good. So you know what? We'll add a lot of that to the website, and we'll make notes on all of that stuff that'll be available there. But yeah, that's 100% correct. He's using Aristotelian terminology so much so that we're going to have to continue our Aristotle courses as well to really understand this book. But it gives us good reason to go back there. Okay, let's see his third one. The third way. So the first two, you can see the types of moves he's going to make here. The third way is taken from possibility and necessity. And it runs thusly. We find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be, things that might be or might not be, things that are possible, since they are found to be generated and to corrupt, and consequently, they are possible to be and not to be. Okay. I plant a bunch of oak trees, a couple of them grow up really strong, one of them's a little sick, eventually they all die. Okay, so it's possible for that tree to be and not to be. But it is impossible for these always to exist. Nothing like that, which could be but could also not be, is eternally significant or eternally necessary. For that which is possible not to be, at some time is not. Therefore, if everything is possible not to be, he's talking about every individual thing in the universe, then at one time there could have been nothing in existence. Now, if this were true, even now there would be nothing in existence, because that which does not exist only begins to exist by something already existing. Cool. Think about it this way. There's a bunch of things in the universe. Okay. They're all possibly existing. They're all coming into being and going out of being. Okay. All not necessarily existent. Okay. Given enough time, there should be a moment, Aquinas is saying, where they all just happen not to exist. But if there ever was a time where they all happen not to exist, then none of them would exist now. So all of the things that could be, but also could not be, are not sufficient explanation for why anything is here at all. It looks like we're going to need a necessary being in order for all the things, again, just living in this middle area where we're just looking at contingent possible things that exist in the mean between actuality and potentiality, being and non-being. Just by looking at those things, we can say, okay, the nature of those dominoes is need to be knocked over. There must be a prime domino knockover. The nature of those things is that they don't have to be here. They're not necessarily being. So what does that tell me about what else must be in the universe, even if I'm only looking at those things? Let's see. But it is impossible for these always to exist, for that which is possible not to be at some time is not. Therefore, if everything is possible not to be, then at one time there could have been nothing in existence. Now, if that were ever true, even now there would be nothing in existence, because nothing comes from nothing. Okay. Therefore, if at one time nothing was in existence, it would have been impossible for anything to have begun to exist. And thus, even now, nothing would be in existence, which is absurd. Here we are. What does it mean that a bunch of things that aren't necessarily being are here? Therefore, not all beings are merely possible, but there must exist some other being, other than the ones that we're examining here, whose existence is necessary. But every necessary thing either has its necessity caused by another or not. Now, it is impossible to go on to infinity in necessary things, which have their necessity caused by another. All right, fine. Maybe God made a bunch of things that have to be, I guess, but okay. There's got to be one of those things that doesn't get its necessity of being from something else, and that's the God thing. That's obviously where he's leading to with this. Okay. As has already been proved in regard to efficient causes, same as with efficient causes. Therefore, we cannot but postulate we have to acknowledge that there must be in existence some being having of itself its own necessity, and not receiving it from another, but rather causing the the need for other things to come about, the necessity of other things that are. This all men speak of as God. Okay. So what is he doing? He's proving he's looking at just through his senses, just his examination of the physical world of contingent, non necessarily being moving objects. And he's saying, that's all I know. But one of the things I know is that those things don't contain the explanation for their existence in themselves. And there must be something that's not like that, which does explain why those things exist temporally, um, causally, you know, and necessarily.
It's like he's saying, in other words, that there must be some being or quality or fundament in the cosmos that transcends this dualism of things being in existence right now and not right now. And of course, by saying right now, I am invoking time necessarily. And so, by implication, this this other thing probably must be timeless. It must
Okay,
be
yeah, we're going to start getting into
even
the qualities of God.
yeah,
They're already smuggled in
even
here. That's right.
outside time. Just like a director or a film editor is not in the frames, he
He
is
must exist.
he's seeing the things in the frames coming in and out of the frames, coming in and out of
That's well
camera
said.
view. Yeah,
Yep.
and he's choosing and selecting how to sequence the film and whatever, and the film exists. And the director doesn't necessarily need to appear there. He can just choose not to appear, but he is the one who calls the shots there.
That's
And
a great
so, yeah,
analogy. Yeah, that's good. That's
it's
what
tough to
Aquinas is
think
doing.
about
He's
this.
This is interesting. I like the way you put that. That's a clever teaching tool. I want to think about it. So he's saying Aquinas is saying, look, all I know is the movie. I'm sitting here and all I can see is the movie. And I'm watching this movie and I'm saying to myself, it doesn't make sense that these characters would say all these lines the way they're saying them. This is an analogy, right? It's just an analogy. But he's saying it doesn't make sense that the framing would be set up. There must be a camera that I'm not seeing because here's the film. There's something else that has to be going on for this story to be told so well. I propose a writer and a director. Now, he hasn't seen the writer and he hasn't seen the director. All he's seen is the movie. He says everything I can experience here is coming through my senses, but I'm noticing that the props don't explain the movie. The characters don't explain the movie. Something else is explaining the movie, and he says, and this is just an analogy, and obviously it breaks down, but it's an analogy to illustrate the kind of argument he's making. What he's saying is, I'm looking at this movie called Life, and I see things move each other. I see domino knock over domino. I see cue ball hit pool ball into hole. And I think to myself, everything in this movie is being caused by something else. That can't be the explanation for the movie. Because if that goes back forever, there is no prime causer. None of these things should have gotten started. Like there had to be something that started the moving. Where's the first domino getting knocked over from? There must be something unlike everything I'm seeing because everything I'm seeing requires an explanation that is fundamentally different from the nature of the things I'm looking at. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
cool.
the, I think that's the key point. That's the key point. It's not just a matter of quantity. You really need to transcend quality of the physicality.
100. It's a qualitative argument. 100%. 100%. Okay. All right, Aquinas, you're taking us on a roller coaster ride. Let's see number 4. The fourth way is taken from the gradation to be found in things. Okay. So he's looking around at this movie saying, wow, things exist in gradations and steps. Among beings, there are some that are more and less good, more and less true, more and less noble, and the like. But more and less, those are interesting ideas. They're predicated off of different things according as much they resemble in their different ways something which is the maximum, right? This one's bigger than that one. What do you mean? I mean, it's closer to the fullest, biggest thing you can have. Okay. This one is better than that one. What does that mean? I mean, it's closer to the ultimate, absolute maximum good. Okay. Where'd you get that idea from? Um, but that's the only way to make sense of the terms more and less. As a thing is said to be hotter, according as it more nearly resembles that which is the hottest, so that there is something which is truest, something best, something noblest, and consequently something which is uttermost being. It's interesting. We have Descartes says we exist in the mean between potentiality and actuality. Aquinas is saying the same thing. And he's saying there's an ultimate being, therefore, the great I am, the thing that just being qua being, necessary being. So there's a little I hate to say this, you lovely Aristotelians, there's a little bit of Plato in there. For those things that are greatest in truth are greatest in being, as it is written in Aristotle's Metaphysics, number 2. Now, the maximum in any genus is the cause of all in that genus, as fire, which is the maximum heat, is the cause of all hot things. We got to love Aristotelian physics. Don't anybody start making objections based off of that, because it has nothing to do with debunking the argument. And our physics might not be so supreme as you think anyway. So moving on quickly or lightly past that. Therefore, there must also be something which is to all beings the cause of their being, goodness, which is the same, and every other perfection.
Scroll
This we
scroll a
call,
bit. Scroll a bit. The text isn't visible.
oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Goodness, perfection, and being. Being and goodness, he thinks, are the same. And everybody knows that we call that thing God. Okay, we exist in gradations. Truth, being, goodness, they're all kind of the same thing. We'll have to get to that later in another section. But we're not ultimate good. And we look at one person, we say he's good, but this guy's better. This guy's closer to good than this. Well, what do we mean? Well, we mean there's an absolute standard somewhere. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make those distinctions. Socrates is coming in here. You can't really live without a little bit of the Platonic, even if you're very Aristotelian.
Perhaps look at it this way. It's like our world, our universe is like a mountain country, and we are walking about, and we easily notice that in some directions we're going up, we're walking up, and we might start to suspect that there will be the highest peak somewhere, but we don't know where it is. But we know that since there are peaks spread about the country with different altitudes, there must be one that is the highest of all.
Why?
And yeah, why?
Why?
Why? Why? Because we see differences in the different peaks that are in our senses.
Uh-huh.
So mathematically, since the country is a thing that's bounded, within bounds there must be the highest one. But if we are extrapolating to the entire universe, and it's so unfathomably immense, who knows how large the universe is, there must be something that is the ultimate being, or the ultimate mind, or something, or the ultimate sentience.
Okay, I'm just pulling up a few resources for us here. Okay, so this argument is I think you said it. Okay. What Aquinas is not saying is here's a big thing, here's a bigger thing, there must be a thing that's just bigness itself. Socrates said that. Plato said that. What Aquinas is saying, here's a thing that exists a bit, it's partially actualized. Here's a thing that exists more, but it's on its way down. And there's got to be being qua being just being itself. Okay, that's his one argument. But the second thing is, and this argument really is Socratic, is he's saying, oh, let me pull this up again. He's saying the terms more and less are meaningful to us when we're having a conversation. We know what we mean. But those terms are meaningless unless there is a maximum absolute that one could be closer to than another. And this argument comes from Socrates. It is a much better argument than you might imagine it being. I think it's in the Phaedo. Let's see if we can find it here. Boom, boom, boom. It's not in the. Is it in the Phaedo? Let's see. Well, here's not the text. Let's go find the text of the Phaedo. Let's see.
Perhaps the Phaedo, either in the Project Gutenberg or in Wikimedia.
Oh wait, I'm not sharing the right page. Sorry.
Or I can send you my Google Doc of the Phaedo.
Oh, we got it here.
Okay.
I just wasn't sharing the right page because I'm a dope.
Yeah, so he is comparing things there with the word equality and inequality.
Okay, so more or less equal. How do we have these ideas? How do they make any sense? Socrates thinks the fact that they do make sense proves an awful lot about the world. So I'll paraphrase and rehearse, hopefully not too badly, the argument. Imagine something like this. If I drew a 7 on a chalkboard and I drew another 7 on a chalkboard and I drew a 6 on the chalkboard and I asked you which two were the same, you would say the first two are the same. But they're not the same. No one has ever drawn a 7 on a chalkboard that was the same as any other 7 drawn on a chalkboard. They're not even close to the same. They've got very, very little in common if you zoom in on them. But we recognize which two are the same. But that's weird because nothing you've ever experienced is the same as anything else, unless it's just that thing. So where the hell did you get this idea of sameness? Socrates asked this question. It's like, what the hell is going on in your brain? I mean, we walk into a statuette workshop and we see statues of Zeus and we see statues of Venus and we see statues of Apollo and statues of Mars. And we think, wow, great statues. And we look on a shelf and we see a bunch of statues of Zeus, and they're some made of bronze, some made of stone, some made of gold. And we say, those are the same. Those are the Zeus statue, but they all look different from each other and they're made of different materials. What if we saw a shelf full of stone statues of Zeus and Apollo and then a statues of wood made of Zeus and Apollo? All right. The first set are the same and the second set are the same. But nothing in that shop is the same as anything else. And yet we can use the word same as if we understand what the heck it means. And what Socrates pointed out is nothing you have ever experienced in your entire life is the same. So why do you have that idea? How do you have that idea?
There is literally no reason for people to get bored at all.
That's true. If you like diversity, you've come to the right place. But because of that, nothing is the same. So how can you use the word? How can I know what you mean when you use the word? What if I say these two statues are the same because they're both made of stone, but one's of Apollo and one's of Zeus? And then you grab another stone one made of Zeus and you say these two are more the same because they're both made of stone and they're both of Zeus, but they're not the same. There's a billion ways that they're different.
You have to even marvel at how even two protons are not the same because they're not spinning the same and whatever.
Yeah, unless all protons are one proton. But yeah, absolutely. Okay, so nothing is the same that you've ever experienced, and yet you call these two the same more than these other two, and I know what you mean, and you're clearly correct. Socrates says, I'm sorry, fish, but notice the weirdness of water for a second. Just notice how weird the water is that you're swimming in here. You're using the word same, and you're right to use it, and you're using it correctly, and I know what you mean, but you've never experienced anything like that. And then he used that to point to what must be true of absolute realms beyond the one that we're in, which is exactly the same move that Aquinas is making here. The other thing, what you brought up, oh no, we'll get back to that was the other one. Okay. All right. that was just a little side note. What Aquinas is saying here is all things exist in gradation. Some are more real and some are less real. Some are dying and some are being born. Some are peak actualized for themselves and on their way down, whatever. But how we can notice that, how we could ever make sense of the terms more and less and the gradation itself means that we must be referring to a maximum. Plato said, there is sameness and unification in the divine after you die, and you were there before you were born, and so you know what that idea is. We don't have to get more into that, but he thought he could understand some transcendental truths, and it's not clear that Aquinas is doing anything different when he's getting at the nature of the divine and using that terminology to potentially be describing the same thing with the same type of argument here. Okay, there must be a maximum, being qua being itself, the thing that is maximally goodness and being and perfection. If you can notice that one thing is better than another, if you can notice that one thing is more real than another, you're referring to the fact that you intrinsically know there's a great I am out there. There must be, or else those words that you are allowed to use to compare two things wouldn't make sense, but they do
I,
make sense.
I at least believe it is worthwhile to try to conceive of perfection, because otherwise, if insufficient people are trying to cognize perfection, our culture is doomed. It's the stakes are like that.
Yeah, there might be nothing better to meditate about. I think you could be right about that, my friend. Let's see if we can fill up our day with the most amount of time thinking about that. Part of the reason we started these classes again is I need to spend more time thinking about that. And so this gives us, affords us the opportunity to do so. All right, let's see if we're still with Aquinas and we want to see his fifth argument that God exists. Again, just by examining the world around him, none of this ensemble intellectual, I can figure it out just in my own head stuff. I'm going to look at the nature of the way the world is and figure out what must also be out there for this to exist. And so far, we've got a prime mover who is sufficient to cause all things to happen, who is being in the absolute sense and gives the actuality to all things to the degree that they end up getting them. That must be a non-contingent being, so far as what we've seen. Okay, the fifth way is taken from the governance of the world. Okay, he's got a fifth argument to prove just by looking around. We see that things which lack intelligence, such as natural bodies, act for an end. And this is evident by their acting always or nearly always in the same way, so as to obtain the best result. It's an interesting idea. Scott Adams had this idea that the universe is existing in frames, and it goes out of existence and pops into existence between every moment, and you have no idea how much quote unquote time exists between then. But every time it re-exists, the material objects in it move slightly if they have the potential to do so, and they move towards each other if they're material, because that's his explanation for gravity. Now, we should caveat on that, which is that he was writing in an allegorical sense. So it's not necessarily that he was trying to argue scientifically that that's the way it works. Not necessarily, anyway. But that's so we maybe shouldn't have brought it up if we can't treat it properly. But we bring it up only for the reason of saying it does consistently keep acting in the same way, which seems to mean that it has an end, a purpose. Now, for Scott, God exploded himself into everything and was reconstituting himself and coming back together. Again, it's allegorical. You don't have to pick on the. We're going to be looking at Scott. We're going to look more carefully at it, and we'll treat it properly in another class. But what Aquinas is pointing out here is, well, whatever this gravity stuff is, whatever this electricity stuff is, these material bodies seem to follow laws as if there's a universal principle that they're all aimed in one direction and they're doing their part to come together to become whatever it is that they're supposed to be. It's not just chaos. In other words, it's not just random chaos doing whatever, it's ordered. Where the hell did that come from? None of the things seem to be the source of their own order. but they're all acting as if there's a law or a rule governing the whole thing, a purpose to it all. Hence, it is plain. This is a better argument than it maybe sounds at first to those of you who think that you understand all these things through scientific principles, which are really just formulaic descriptions of what's actually happening. Aquinas isn't saying because you can use the formula for an ellipse to describe the future positions of heavenly bodies, therefore they're all following the law of the ellipse. What he's saying is the fact that ordered formulas work at all and that science is doable at all shows that there's some sort of overall organizing principle of order governing all this stuff. And if you look at any individual thing, it wouldn't have the ability to know about the rest of the cosmos and to make all that order happen. It has to be there's something giving universal principles to everything. And if there is something like that, what other word do we use for that besides God? I think that's where he's going. Let's see. Hence, it is plain that not fortuitously, but designedly do they achieve their end. Now, whatever lacks intelligence cannot move towards an end. Little bits of rock and molecules and stuff like that, unless we go be panpsychists. I mean, like, even then, how does it have the knowledge of the whole universe? Unless it be directed by some being endowed with knowledge and intelligence. Okay, the knowledgeable and intelligent creatures like us are not governing the motions of all the molecules and material in the universe, so it's not our intelligence that's doing it. As the arrow is shot to its mark by the archer, therefore, some intelligence, some intelligent being must exist for there to be order, some intelligent, intelligible, reasonable, logical. This is one of the reasons why Nietzsche pointed out that science is a Christian invention. There's a metaphysics behind the whole mythology of the world could be understood if I just spent my time trying to figure it out. It is intelligible and it would be good to figure it out. There's a whole mythology underpinning that, which is not something any scientist discovered in his telescope or his microscope. I saw a clip of Jordan Peterson today on my shorts reel while I was scrolling. And he said, it turns out a lot of things die when God dies. One of the things you didn't expect to die is science. But apparently it can't survive without the God of the Christians. And this is partly why. Okay, therefore, some
Hold on,
intelligent.
hold on, hold
Yeah,
on,
okay.
hold on. I gotta push back on that because
Mhm.
I've studied the Ionians, which Nietzsche also studied. Those who are disparagingly called pre-Socratics, as if they just respond to Socrates or they just exist so Socrates might arise. But they are way, way more than just pre-Socratics. They are
Of
the
course.
people who created the first central heatings in homes. Uh,
Sure.
these are they created and helped create systems for navigating the Mediterranean
No
uh,
doubt.
at night through with the stars, instruments of navigation, etc. They benefited heavily from the Egyptians, the Phoenicians,
Of
the
course.
Persians, etc. They were at the crossroads of so many cultures, like also the Sumerians, the Mesopotamians,
Uh-huh.
with their astronomy and mathematics. So these guys had people like Heraclitus, Thales, Anaximenes,
Anaximander, yep.
Anaximander, who were trying on the hunt to figure out where a fundamental principle of the entire universe is. They called it many different names.
Wait
They
a minute,
weren't.
wait. They were on
Yeah,
the hunt for an ultimate principle to describe the universe, and that gives explanation for its order?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah.
were. Yeah, they
And
were.
also existence, and Heraclitus as well, and Anaximander, Anaxagoras as well. And
Thales,
Anaxagoras integrates all these brilliant minds from the Ionian times
all
with
of
all
this is
their
correct.
science and engineering.
Yep.
And he says that there must be a nous, a mind,
Yeah,
Nous,
yeah.
that the universe must have a mind.
Keep going.
Because it's so self-consistent that it must work like a mind, and it must be a brilliant mind. It must be a perfect mind.
No
And
disagreement.
that's why I disagree
What?
that that giving so much credit to Christianity that's really recent
Well,
on the stage
well, well,
is
well. Wait a
is
minute.
is is giving all the credit, or saying that science is their invention. It's kind of going too far, because
Well,
unfortunately for us, science has been invented by the Ionians, then lost and forgotten because wars happen, Persians
no,
invade, whatever.
maybe.
Then the Romans came along and invented more stuff, and kind of played with the idea of even steam machines, but didn't go
Okay, but wait a
fully in
minute.
that
Wait a minute.
direction.
I have
Yeah,
no disagreement with your take on pre-Socratic philosophy. Let's add to it the fact that Socrates was trying to do the same thing and find the arche,
yeah,
which
yeah.
was the source of all the order. But I have no disagreement with you on any of that. But we're reading the Catholics here, and of course they determined that Socrates had saving grace and that he was a Christian. Now hold on a second. We're reading Platonic and Aristotelian ideas right here in Christianity. So Christianity invented science, and it also was the invention, or it borrowed heavily from the Ionians. I agree with you completely
And
that,
from the Zoroastrians, we wouldn't have even angels and the concept of the devil if it weren't the Christians borrowing from
and the
Zoroastrians.
Jews.
Yeah,
Okay, fine.
and the
So
Jews.
there's a lot of mythological and philosophical sources, and of course there's technology and there's some science being invented. I'm not sure it was lost. I mean, they were doing it at the times that you say in the pre-Socratic times, to some degree, different camps of them. They were still doing it in medieval times. We're living in a scientism age after the 1600s, I would say, but so there's a distinction there. But of course, I agree with you. They're doing science periodically when they think it's a useful thing to be doing. They're doing other things they think are more useful, which I think also are more useful most of the time as well. But yes, everything you said there is correct. They are looking for the ultimate source of order in the universe, but that's now a Christian notion. The Christianity here that we're reading is borrowing from Aristotle and Plato directly. Um, so I don't think that makes it not Christian. I'm not disagreeing with your take that these ideas existed in pre-Socratics. We've read them and we're going to read them again. And in the first section of the second year backbone course, and this is a supplement to that we're going to be doing, we look at all the pre-Socratics, and 100%, at least, I would say at least 45% of them are doing exactly what you say they're doing. They're looking for the ultimate answer to everything, which is usually described, or at least sometimes described, as a personality to relate to that is the source of all that order. Sometimes it's a principle that it's not exactly clear how it was being conceptualized, but it is the Christian game. Now that the Christians came along and made it their central game. So, yes, you're correct. We shouldn't think that this is the first time in history that this is being done, but there were Judeo and Zoroastrian moralists and ethicists and cosmologists who existed and had conversations, the ongoing debate and conversation between the philosophers and the religious mythologists that you can see happening in the pre-Socratics with Thales and Anaximander and Anaximenes. These people are all taking these very ideas very seriously and engaging in the mythopoetic texts of Ovid's Metamorphoses and things like that, and Homer. Um, yeah, it didn't start with Aquinas, but
Yeah,
so,
and who knows what else, texts from Egypt and Persia and
sure.
Mesopotamia and whatever, because supposedly Thales studied in Mesopotamia, astronomy.
But there are cultures that don't have this idea. There are cultures that see things as more chaotic, as well, let's leave all that aside. We're not
Yeah,
arguing. Let's, instead of arguing that there's differences or arguing that they're all the same, let's just keep focusing on this. But yes, you are correct to point out that this isn't the first time thinking like this has occurred on Earth. Aquinas is not the first person to say this. Nietzsche can call it Christian because, I mean, look at, as Louis C.K. said the Christians won everything. Just congratulate them. If you don't believe me, what year is it? He says, all right, it's 2006, 2027 years, 6 months, and 3 days is from the time of Christ is when your license expires. That's how
Yeah,
he put it.
the thing is, just as Buddhism would not be a world religion nowadays if it weren't for Emperor Ashoka,
If it weren't
Christianity
for
would
what?
probably, if it weren't for Emperor Ashoka from the Mauryan Empire, Buddhism would not be a world religion, most likely. And similarly for Christianity, if Emperor Constantine weren't like the patron emperor of Christianity, uh, it's kind of shaky if Christianity would become a world religion as it is today. Maybe,
That's a double-sided
maybe,
coin
yeah.
because you could say how many other religious traditions invited him to convert to theirs? So if Christianity wasn't as powerful as it was, would it have ever captured the empire, the empires? I mean, it goes both ways. And we don't
Yeah,
want to
of
be
course.
Marxists about it and just say it's all historical accident. But um, okay, so good points. I'm glad you brought them up. We should have longer discussions about all these things. Have we understood this fifth argument? What was it again? Oh, yeah. Let's say he's he's postulating the governance of the world. Let's just say the principle that there is order and regularity in the world seems to me to be what he's pointing at, and that can't come from individual objects or limited minds. It has to come from a mind that's bigger than the universe itself. I'm putting my own words to this, but he seems to be pointing in that way, in that general direction, and say you can't have that without intelligence, and you can't have it without super intelligence. And so the fact that our little intelligences can make sense of, you know, the few factors which apply to the lateral velocity of water flow through a permeable membrane, and we can have a simple formula for that called Darcy's law and figure out how quickly groundwater will flow from here to here. It's like, okay, everything is ordered and you can use a few time you go do science eventually and you'll find that you can use very simple formulas to describe whole plethoras of phenomena and categories of things. It's like, okay, why would that be the case unless there was some intelligent being behind all of this? We might find
It's
that
a
one the
bit,
least convincing. Go ahead.
it's a bit like you are playing with a very well implemented video game or a simulation, and you start to wonder what generates such
Who coded this?
a nice simulation. So behind that is the code, but then when you examine the code because you had access to it, you will start to wonder who wrote this, because it literally collapses to one line of code, the entire thing. um, who wrote this thing? Yeah, and so that thing is calling, it's calling your attention to a mind, a governing mind. And to me, if I had to pick one of the best arguments for God, it would involve the fact that the universe clearly seems to be fine tuned in terms of the constants and
Interesting.
the physical laws, etc. But even before that is that the universe is so self-consistent, so completely self-consistent, that it is understandable for one. For another, we literally use the universe as kind of like a calculator or a simulator with all the doings of science, because when scientists set up an experiment that uses real world entities, be it people or animals or cells or whatever, or rocks or stones, metals, whatever, they are literally using the mechanics of the universe to
True.
verify verify things, to verify if what they hypothesized is comes true, or is falsified. And the universe proves to be very reliable testing ground.
That's an
um,
interesting argument.
yeah, and why do we live in a universe in which logic, philosophy, and science is possible? uh, it is a it suggests that we are indeed in a very well constructed universe.
Okay. Good. That's an interesting argument. I never heard that before. We know that the laws of physics work on the electronics of the computer. The fact that a computer simulation working on deterministic laws can give us models of the order of the world that actually make accurate predictions. That's what you're saying, correct? Ah, very interesting. Okay, we've almost made it through Aquinas's arguments for the existence of God after he argued that it would be possible to do it in this way and not in the analytical way. We have to see his replies to these two objections that he gave at the first. So let's remind ourselves of those objections really quickly. They were interesting. The first objection: it seems that God does not exist because if one of two contraries be infinite, the other would be altogether destroyed. The word God means that he is infinite goodness. If therefore God existed, there would be no evil, but there is evil, so God does not exist. Further, says objector 2, it is superfluous to suppose because everything can be explained by nature and human action. Okay, so you don't need the hypothesis. His responses are, as Augustine says, since God is the highest good, he would not allow any evil to exist in his works, unless his omnipotence and goodness were such as to bring good even out of evil. This is part of the infinite goodness of God, that he should allow evil to exist and out of it to produce good. We might
And we
need to
see
see.
that. We see that in scripture, like in the story of Joseph. Great evils befall Joseph, so he can save in the 7 years of famine all those people.
Yeah, we might need a better argument than that one, and we might see one later. But yeah, sometimes it does work that way. It's almost like an article of faith. It seems to me like he's excusing away this challenge and saying, "Well, I'm going to be Pangloss for a moment, and everything ultimately works out for the good." But
Pangloss from Voltaire's Candide.
yeah. He glosses over everything. Pan is everything. So he's glossing over everything. Oh, it's the best of all possible worlds. Yeah, I got crucified yesterday, but it's the best of all possible worlds. Yeah, they burn us at the stake because there was an earthquake and they wanted to stop, but it's definitely the best of all possible worlds. It's like, okay, maybe this does work, and it does seem more like a statement of faith to me in a response that says, okay, well, you don't have infinite knowledge to know for sure that there isn't a goodness that's infinite here despite the evil, but it is an argument. We'll leave it there for now, and we'll say maybe we'll do this more later. I'm reminded of Dostoevsky's case. Iosha's faced with his brother who angrily doesn't want him to become a priest and says, look, let me just talk to you about some of the evils in the world that I've seen, and let's see if you can tell me how that's going to work out for a greater good. And it's a pretty hard case. And Alyosha has an answer. He does have an answer, but he's in tears by the time he's delivering that answer because of how good the challenge is. And that level of depth of this question has not really been reached by this objection and its response, I don't think. But we might have time to look at it more later. He's not really dealing with that exactly, except to say, look, there's still space for God to exist. Your objection doesn't knock it out, and here's my 5 good reasons to think he does. Maybe we'll deal with the problem of evil more later. Reply to objection 2, since nature works for a determinate end, under the direction of a higher agent. I can't scroll down anymore. Let's see. Okay. Whatever is done by nature must needs be traced back to God. Okay, so we had seen that in his other arguments. So you think you can explain nature with nature, but you can't. And I've already shown it at least 3 to 5 of the times I just made arguments here. We need a first cause. That's been shown. And all I did was examine nature to do that. So don't think that you have all the answers for nature. I saw this. There's this guy named Cosmic Skeptic who's super awesome online. And I saw him talking in a short today as well. He said something just fascinating and really fantastic. He said, imagine we discovered a book of Shakespeare's sonnets, and we ask ourselves the question, where did this come from? So we get the scientists together, right? This is the analogy for the scientist. He says, okay, so we start studying it, and I start noticing, hey, there's some patterns here. I've discovered the law of iambic pentameter. It goes da 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 da. It goes like the din da din da. Okay, cool. Hey, there's always a dot at the end of sentences. I've discovered laws of punctuation, and then we come back 100, 500 years later, and we've got all sorts of descriptions of how this book works. And somebody comes to the scientists who've come up with all these descriptions and says, okay, have you figured out where the book comes from? And they go, well, we're really close. Look how much we figured out. We'll get there soon. He goes, it's a category mistake. You're not going to get to the author through discovering the laws of what's governing it in that way. So he's saying, look, you might think that scientifically you can describe accurately all of the stuff that's happening in nature just with nature and with no other hypothesis, but you're not in the right category to be answering the question why it has order in the first place. You got to be a metaphysician to do that. And I just was that in my last argument. And my conclusion was there's an ordering intelligence involved in all of this. You could have gotten there without having to try to explain why the formula for an ellipse describes the path around the sun of heavenly bodies or whatever else it is that you're doing. That sort of thing isn't going to get you to understand. You got to zoom out more. You got to be a metaphysician. So, anyway, it reminded me of that. So,
But look at this. Look at it this way, with the
mm,
book of the Apocrypha, which is the book of Susanna. So these two elders were a part of the the priestly class. They were kind of perverts, and Susanna was a very beautiful woman who liked to walk around in her garden and bathe there, and of course bathe without clothes. And they two fortuitously met because each of them individually wanted to spy on her and catch a look. Um, and she caught them red-handed in the act, and they threatened her. Since they are elders, they could claim that she had been adulterous or something like that, something that deserved
abuse of
stoning.
authority.
Yeah, exactly, these guys. So they are witnesses of her bathing naked, but what they wanted to do to get out of their problem was abuse of
Theft.
power.
Yep.
But Daniel, the judge, was very smart, and he noticed that something was amiss with the in trial with the accounts of these two elders, and so he interrogated each of them individually, and he asked them exactly where under which tree was each person and whatever what and their since they were lying, their fabrications didn't match. And
Oh,
what I'm saying here is, if you interrogate every single particle of the universe, they always match. They never tell
uh-huh.
contradicting tales.
Huh.
This is
I'm
what I
surprised how
mean.
much you like the fifth argument. This is kind of
Yeah,
cool. It must be the Aristotle in you.
this is what I mean. It's really amazing how you can trust the self consistency of this physical universe, which, if your ontology also includes things like mind and divinity and ideas and connections and whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Even if the from the sun to the edge of the known universe, it's quite a long trip. But still, you don't need to be so amazed by this physicality, because there's way more than just that, even.
Huh. This is awesome. We got to bring Tartaglia back into this. If anybody's watching who wants to talk to a person who thinks in an Aristotelian way, Roger will be here. You should join us with the link. I forgot to put it out on X right now. You should join us in future for these conversations. I'm surprised how much you like the
Well,
fifth argument.
I was probably training myself unawares of Aristotle, basically by studying science since college, basically, and
Uh-huh.
university as well, because all of that is in some sense or another heavily drawing from Aristotle. The
It's
Aristotle
definitely the
was
Aristotelian instinct. Yeah. All of science is
Aristotle.
that instinct.
Socrates is for ethics, and Aristotle is for natural philosophy.
You
And
guys will have
science,
your time again soon, okay?
yeah.
Take a deep breath. Just because the Aristotelian scientism is in its twilight hours, you will rise again. You will rise again. Give us Platonists a moment to speak. Our
Plato is
instinct,
still pointing up in
yeah,
Michelangelo's fresco.
the William Jamesian, Nietzschean, Kierkegaardian, Jungian. Look, the voice is coming and it's on the rise for a reason, but only because you guys spoke so well and we have to respond. And so you'll have your chance to respond again. But this is fantastic. Okay, let's finish up his response to this idea that the facts of nature are enough. So also, whatever is done voluntarily must also be traced back to some higher cause other than human reason or will, since these can change or fail. Just you just expressed this very eloquently. So there's plenty of minds, but there's got to be a big one. There's plenty of objects doing things that you can describe formulaically, but where'd all that order come from? It's exactly what he's saying. I mean, bravo. I'm surprised how Aristotelian you are. This is cool. Okay. For all
Even
things,
even even I am.
yeah. Well, I thought it's going to be interesting to see how much of this you predict ahead of time in our conversations, and you're on top of, and if he loses you somewhere, this is going to be really fun to do. Okay. He finally says, for all things that are changeable and capable of defect must be traced back to an immovable and self-necessary first principle. He's kind of summing up all his arguments here, as was shown in the body of the article. Okay. That's his case. And this is an Aristotelian case against scientism, saying we don't need God. It's a superfluous hypothesis. We can explain it all. No, you can describe it all. What you're not explaining is why it's explicable in the first place and where all this order came from. So you can have a certain type of scientismist who says, I just want to describe it, and that's all it means to understand something. There is no God, and there's no reason for God, and a failed hypothesis, and all of that. Or you can have a real Aristotelian, like a hardcore one, like Aquinas, who says, oh, yeah, I'll embrace all that scientific descriptive regularity stuff. And then I'm going to notice what that's telling me about the world. It's telling me things are ordered in a causal nexus and they bump into each other, and that can't go back forever. There must be something that's qualitatively not like that, as you pointed out earlier, Roger, when you pointed out that that was a qualitative argument. There's got to be something that was the first mover, that is itself self-sufficient in its own necessity, a great I am. I mean, it's like, oh gosh, the greatest poets of the greatest storytellers of poetry and mythology that created civilizations that worked to invent philosophy and science in the first place were all telling us the story that there's a being qua being out there, and we need to also relate to him properly if we're going to navigate this world he created. So Aristotle can get to that conclusion by embracing science rather than by rejecting it. And those of us in the Platonic are interested not in rejecting science, but in putting it back in its little box, which you don't have to do. You can just embrace it with Aquinas, and it works out quite well. So I'm quite surprised that the fifth argument was your favorite. I think this is all fantastic. Um, let's let's say, hey, let's quickly add this back and say, okay, we'll scroll back up and remind ourselves of what we've done here. The first thing we did was we dealt with 10 questions in 4 or 5 videos, introducing how all this works. And the first 10 questions were about the treatise on sacred doctrine, saying, okay, we're going to, in this class, in this book, Aquinas says, we're going to use reason and arguments to try to figure out what's true about God, about nature, about ourselves, about creation, about all this stuff without religion. We're just going to try to figure it out using reason to see how far we can get. But before we start, let's mention that there's another way to get to truth, it seems, and let's see if we think that that's reasonable. Now, ours is based in reason. Reason is the school marm of what we're doing, and she's the ultimate authority, and you can't say anything unreasonable, and it's all we're going to base all of our truths of human knowledge on is the rules of right reason and argument and debate. That's what we're going to do here in this book. But before we start, there's another thing. There's these people who have books written by God, and they try to figure out which ones are actually written by God. And then they try to discover truths where God is sort of revealing himself to them. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to use reason and see what we can get to. And right now, we think we found 5 good arguments for why there must be a God. But we didn't do that by saying, well, the Bible says so. I believe it because the Bible tells me so. But before we do that, what about the people who do say, I believe it because the Bible tells me so? And he says, well, they should use argument too sometimes. That's appropriate. And they need to figure things out. And but it is actually a legitimate science. It's a means of coming to truth if they do it properly. We're not going to do it, but we're not going to poo-poo it. And it's actually a little bit nobler than what we're doing. And it might even get you to some truths that we can't get to. So he started out with 10 questions related to the nature of that, and we dealt through those with our videos. And then he got on to the fact that he was going to talk about God, the Trinity, and creation. So, of God, of rational creatures advances towards God, and of Christ. Those were the 3 things we had to do. In the of God section, first he was going to deal with the divine essence, the nature of God, and whether he exists. Whatever concerns the distinctions of the persons of the divine Godhead, and whatever concerns the procession is creation, how he's creating and how they relate to him that way. Those are the three sections underneath the first section. And then on the first of those three, we have to deal with the question of God's existence. One, whether God exists. And while we're dealing with that, we have three questions here, and we dealt with them. Can you just know that God exists because it's a self evident proposition? Aquinas says, I don't think so. Sort of, maybe, kind of, if you're well learned, perhaps, but it doesn't really work for me. Then he says, well, would it be possible to prove God exists by examining the world? And he says, yes, I think it would be. And then he goes and does that. And this is the video that we did today, is dealing with his arguments that God exists from his examination of the world. In order to supplement this, I really do want to one day, uh, maybe we can't do this today, but look at the ontological argument for God's existence by Anselm, who says actually that first one would be a great way to do it. It's an interesting and more solid argument than people think, perhaps. But we did that. In the last video, we dealt with the first two questions. Can it be proven analytically? Can it be demonstrated? Well, is it self-evident is actually a little bit different than that, because he says, can it be demonstrated analytically or through examination? And he says through examination, and then he does. He says, well, first I examine the world and I discover that things are in motion. And the way that they're in motion is that they have to be put in motion by other things, and that can't go back forever. God is the prime mover. There must be one. That's what we mean by God. The second way is from efficient cause. The world of sense, we discover efficient causes. There's no case known where a thing can be found to be the efficient cause of itself. So that can't go back forever. There must be something that necessarily is. And the thing that necessarily is, that is the explanation for its own existence, is what we mean by God. And I know that there must be something like that, because everything else is not like that. And everything else, if everything was not like that, then there wouldn't be anything. But here are things. So again, I'm examining the world as I have it, and I'm noticing there must be a God behind all this. The third way is possibility and necessity, which is, and then the gradation. So if it's possible for something not to be, then there's a time when it isn't. Okay, but if everything is like that, then it could be a nothingness, and if there's a nothingness, you never get anything started. But here we are, so there must be a somethingness at the it's like a prime mover in a potentiality, actuality sort of way. He's actualization itself. And then he gave us a fourth way, because things can be more or less, because there's a comparison. That's all implicitly a reference to an ultimate thing that just is, that being qua being, and goodness as goodness itself. And you might not have noticed it, but there it is. You've been talking in a way that shows that since your language is meaningful, it must be the case that there is some ultimate thing like that. And then the fifth way is the fact that order in nature, basically. So these are cosmological arguments, or at least some of them are. Okay, so we've finished that. We're going to, on the website, add a whole bunch of extra stuff and more resources and things like that. But we're going to end this video soon. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, I haven't done the next section yet, but we will be adding in these videos on the existence of God, and probably a whole bunch of stuff on Aristotle's four causes, because he's referencing three of them in there, as Roger pointed out. So let's actually read Aristotle. Every citation, I haven't put this into the website yet, but every citation that Aquinas makes, either in the form of his puppet objectors or himself, is going to be something that's added to this website as well. So I'm going to go through and do that for the last section with these 10 questions. The text of the Summa is on this website. Our notes about his argument and putting it in formal forms on there. These puppet cartoons of objectors responding and Aquinas responding to them are on there. Illustrations of the way he thinks, but I'm going to put in all those extra, besides those illustrations, all those extra sources. So we'll be adding these two videos from the existence of God question into this soon. And if anybody wants access to this, there's a password. You should DM me. If anybody wants to come on the stream, we are going to be reading through the entire Summa Theologica, and we're only on question 2 right now. And there's 119 in the first part. And each one of them has dozens of questions sometimes. So we've got lots and lots of stuff that we're going to do So if you want to be a part of this and you want to be on the live stream and you want to talk about it, oh, I should say this. Many people have given us the feedback that Dr. Tartaglia has got to come back here and tell us why reason is all that matters and Aquinas is wrong in the first 10 questions of his first treatise, because he's really good at making that case. And he and I have been having that discussion for about 15 years now, and he's fantastic at making that case. And so we're going to get some real challenges to the idea that even though we're doing philosophy with Aquinas, the first thing Aquinas said is that faith is a legitimate foundation for truth. And are we even okay as philosophers saying that our game is not the only game in town? How can he be so okay with that? He and I actually had that discussion again the other night when we brought it up, and it wasn't recorded, but it was fantastic. So we'll be doing that again soon as well, and we'll supplement that first section with that. That being said, one of the problems with this format is we do the reading and we do the discussion, and it's all really great. And then I hit end stream and we have an after discussion that's at least 10,000 times better every time, every single time. So I think what I might do this time is end the stream, open up another one and do a recording, and let's just chat. And if you guys are lucky or you want to pay, I guess, I mean, we need a little bit of funds to keep this going, but we're going to do it anyway at the rate we're doing it. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but you're all, I can tell you without this is not salesmanship and this is not hyperbole. Um, you're missing out on a lot by not being a part of the stream and getting your face or even just an icon in here and talking with us and then being present for the after conversations, which for some reason are just always so much better. So with that, we're going to end the stream and we're going to keep doing this as regularly as we can. Probably tomorrow night, maybe. We'll see. All right. We'll talk to y'all later. Roger, any final thoughts?
Yeah, of course. In my perspective, from what I've been experiencing from the Summa Theologica, it seems to me it's a bit like Aquinas read so much of Aristotle that he became a bit like Aristotle minded so much that it's the next best thing as someone going to the grave, getting Aristotle, reviving him, making him read the entire Bible and the writings of Paul and the other arguments of other theologians shortly before Aquinas. And that's what's coming out here, because Aquinas is theologizing in a very, very Aristotelian manner, but with biblical scripture in mind.
It's going to be hard for me to not insert some Platonists and Neoplatonists into this as we go, but maybe we'll do
Of
the on
course,
some video.
Aristotle was
Um,
also Plato's student, so
yeah, he was. All right, so he was. What a wayward student. No, we need the Aristotelian voice. Um, so I see what you're saying. Would you think of Aquinas as a compiler more than an original thinker? I mean, so far, I know
so
we've just
far,
barely
yeah.
go
So
in
so
this.
far, so far, I can say this is an innovation in thought, in theology, or the use of logic, or a nice thought on natural philosophy that's genuinely new. Uh, yeah. So far, I've detected no originality.
Okay, that's interesting because I said earlier, look at all the future thinkers he's predicting and responding to before they even show up. And we really have seen this. I haven't highlighted it as much as I needed to, but Kierkegaard was in there. Uh, we've mentioned Pangloss and we've mentioned all sorts of like literary characters and thinkers. When we get to ethics, it's Mill is in there. Kant is in there. He already mentioned the a priori and the a posteriori as concepts
Yeah,
in this
but look at the
conversation.
Summa Theologica as a huge and vast agora of people who um, Aquinas made the very best efforts to make them butt heads with each other. That, in that sense, the Summa Theologica is very very precious.
All right, so a decade or so ago, I was having this conversation with Tartaglia, and he had this idea that you hear in academia often, like, well, because we're post Kant, we have access to the a priori and the a posteriori distinction, and blah blah blah. And I was like, no, they had that in pre-Socratic times. He goes, what? And I was like, no, this isn't so linear as you think it is. And he says, are you sure about that? Because he's always, he'll always push me. And sometimes I don't actually. I go to the text and I don't have the evidence for what I think and I have to change my mind. I said, why don't we do an experiment? I said, let's do an experiment. Let's pull up the Summa Theologica by Aquinas and let's pick a random section and let's start reading. We didn't even get halfway through it. And he goes, oh my God, there's Mill, there's Kant. He's talking about all these thinkers before they showed up. And I was like, okay, that one worked out. They don't all work out for me, but I had a hunch that if we just took another look at this, that we would see that. And that's one of the things I was hoping that we would get in the second year material. This isn't exactly the deep dive third year stuff, but as we read through the Summa Theologica, one of the impressions I wanted to create here or to illustrate here through Aquinas is 127 of the best thinkers all in one tent having a real discussion. And if you're seeing him compiling pre-Socratics, which he is, 100%. There's a little Plato in there. There's a lot of Aristotle, and there's definitely some pre-Socratic ideas. Okay, well, is he borrowing? Is he stealing? Is he compiling? Because the next thing in the next breath, he's pulling Kierkegaard in. Is he just timeless? Is that a different way of thinking? Nietzsche said the purpose of a philosopher is to become outside your time, to become timeless, to not be a product of your time.
I fully agree. Yeah,
it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
So this is interesting, and this is just starting, and it's getting more interesting than I even thought it would. So
yeah, exactly. If you want to be an actual thinker of meriting of your salt, you must be as least contingent of your time and place, as least a product of your time and place as possible.
he responded to William James in the last video we did. Right? He had an objector say, "Wait a minute, if you have a proof for God's existence, then there's no room for faith anymore." That's William. I mean, so maybe Aquinas is the tent where everybody before and after is meeting and butting heads in real time, and he's giving us his perspective on it. Sure. This has gotten more interesting than I thought it would, and it's only going to get better. So everybody who's watching on X will say goodbye. We'll upload it to YouTube pretty soon, and we'll see you all next time, maybe tomorrow. Possibly. Oh, final